We are discussing investment trends with Reginald Kadzutu. Reginald, welcome back to the show. It's the end of the quarter. We have the last quarter. It's the final leg for the year 2020. A lot has happened with that in as far as COVID-19 is concerned, but there still have been some pockets of making money. Maybe you can walk us through briefly, what are the investment trends globally and locally?
Thanks, Mbitha. If you look at the global investment trends, especially starting from February coming now, you look at the environment that has been occasioned by COVID. So we are in a low inflation, low interest rate environment, which generally will favor equities. And that's why you'll realize that the equities market has done well globally. Point in case apart from Kenya, but in global markets, the US market, the European markets, everywhere, they've done well. But when you're in a low inflation environment and low interest rate environment, people become a bit more pro-risk. And people will pump in money into equities. And the US market has done better than all the other markets because the US market is more, it's more leaned towards tech and health. So if you notice the stocks that have gone up, your Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google, and then your health stocks have also gone up. Unlike the European market and the Asian market, which are more leaned towards financial securities, which are cyclical. Yeah. So ideally, when you are getting out of a recession, the cyclical stocks will generally do better than the stocks that do well inside a recession, like what the US has happened in the US, which this time around didn't happen, because we are coming out of this recession, but you'll realize that the European markets are not doing that well because the financial stocks are still not doing that well. So you find a lot of money move into the equities and out of fixed income and money markets globally because most investors went pro-risk. You can borrow cheap at 0.5%, put it in equities, exactly. and try your hand in that. So generally, that's the direction that globally things have gone. Stocks that have suffered definitely are the property stocks and property investment. During a lockdown, you're not looking for a condo at a beach somewhere. It's the last thing that is on your head. Yes. So you realize investments in property did suffer quite a bit during that period. But that market had not fully recovered anywhere from post 2008. But what you've also seen that has been happening is a lot of trades happening in the commodities market. So that's your energy, that's your agricultural produce, your sugar, and your all the other things. And because of that, you realize there's a lot of speculation, which messes up prices of commodities. But a lot of trades have gone into the commodity market, which is sad, because the more money that goes into commodity market, it's, so to speak, unproductive money. It is not money that is going to build infrastructure assets to create employment, growth, and future income. It's money seated on pork bellies and all these other things, which are consumption, so to speak, and not investment, financial investments. So it's more of investing in consumption, which is a trend that we have been seeing. So you realize global growth in terms of economic growth will definitely not pick up as fast, and even going into the next 2-3 years will be a bit suppressed as much as people, as long as people continue to put more money into consumption investment than into financial investment that now builds infrastructure, mines, employment, and all those things. So globally, that's what has been happening. If you try to bring it down back home, we are kind of in a similar operating environment like globally. So low inflation, low interest rate. Yes. But then we are not pro-risk. Okay. So the custodians of the savings in this country, your pension funds, your insurance companies, and your banks, are risk averse completely. So you find, instead of equities doing well during this point in time, you realize it's the bond market that has actually done well, because everyone has flooded money to the bond market and left out the equity market. So we are seeing trends where most people are risk averse. So either money is being parked in fixed income or it's going into is going to the government bonds, so to speak. And to a certain extent, you can't blame the investors. So for example, if you take the banking stocks, with what they did during COVID in terms of not provisioning and not writing off, that goes against the principles of faithful and relevant accounting, because now the information that you are given is not information that is sufficient for me to know what claims they have on their cash flows, what's their financial position. So if I buy a banking stock today, I buy Absa, KCB, Equity, whoever I buy, and then in December they come and say we are writing off 20% or 30% of our loan book, then for lack of a better word, I am sunk, because then their stock prices will go down. So that has affected generally how also investors would have invested, but we are too risk averse as an investment community, where at this point and in such an environment you will have expected you'll get more returns and better returns in equity than in the fixed income, where you have low inflation and low interest rate. So generally between now and February and now, that's generally what has been playing around globally and locally.
Okay. But I mean, you bring in some very interesting perspectives when you just compare what is happening globally as well as locally. And perhaps I can put in a different dimension. So in Africa today, am I conservative because I don't know whether I'll have an opportunity to earn? So it's better to preserve my capital so that at least I can put a meal on my table tomorrow or the day after. And when we're looking at this, you're sort of looking at the income per capita and comparing this to the developed worlds. Could you say that in places like the United States, if you make an investment and you lose it, you don't lose your bed, you don't lose the opportunity to take your children to school, you don't lose sleep over wondering will I have food or not? Do this different economic backgrounds then define the investment culture if you compare Africa and the developed world?
That's true, and I think one field of study that should be gaining prominence during this period is behavioral finance, where it's no longer about technical analysis and everything, but it's literally during a crisis, how does an investor behave? And as you've mentioned, during a crisis, how does an investor in a developing country versus a developed country actually behave? So if you come to a developing country, let's take Kenya as an example. If you look at the level of disposable income that an individual has, you realize vis-a-vis maybe even a country that has the same per capita income, they might have a higher disposable income. Apart from normal inflation, we have one of the highest tax regimes around, and taxation is literally inflation, so it eats into your disposable income. So if you have inflation which is increasing the prices of food, and I think the last time on the show we discussed and you realized inflation for the lower income is actually very high. It was around 10% from the last year. So if you are in such a situation where your disposable income is shrinking with every budget cycle, what does that do? It reduces your capacity to save. Okay. Yeah, and if your capacity to save has been reduced, that means your capacity to also invest or take risks also reduces. So you realize someone with who had a saving of 10,000 last year, most probably will have a saving of 9,000 this year. And unfortunately, incomes are not growing. Kenya, for the last 2 years, 3 years, we've been having a negative real growth in terms of income. That means you are actually earning less with every year. That reduces the ability to save, which reduces the availability of funds that would actually go to investments. And if my ability to save is reducing, definitely my risk appetite also starts reducing. What COVID has shown us, especially here in Kenya, is that apart from the government that lives hand to mouth, corporates and individuals also live hand to mouth. Exactly. That's why you lose your job and someone goes into a complete crisis. Why? Because they have not been saving. And not necessarily because they were blowing away all their money, it's just that they actually don't have capacity to save. Yes. And for the few that have saved, and unfortunately chosen the wrong vehicles to save, some of them were wiped out because of wrong investment decisions done by the professionals. You move then to the West or the developed world. you realize a person's capacity to save drastically increases. Some don't have to worry so much about healthcare, apart from the US. You don't have to worry so much about healthcare. So that's additional money that can go somewhere else. Your social security safety nets are there in terms of if I lose my job, I will still get something in terms of an unemployment check and support during the period I'm looking for work, exactly. Which is what we don't have.
Yes.
So if I make an investment bet, I'm not worried that if it goes wrong and I lose my job, because at least I know if I lose my job, I definitely have to change my lifestyle, but I will get some help that will come in.
Okay.
In most places, education is free. Quality education is free. Here you have quantity free education, but the quality is not good. So you hear the minister or the CS of education say, no, take your child to a government school. And I'm thinking, yeah, the government school is not as good as when you went to school anymore, because you've not been paying teachers, the salaries have not been increasing. So the guy has to spend more time looking of how do I make money on the side, exactly. Instead of concentrating on teaching your child. So with all those put together, you realize a person in a developed country with the safety nets they have can take an additional risk when it comes to their investment than we would take. And also the element of the opportunities and the vehicles that are available for them to invest. So for someone in the US who is saving or maxing out their pension, or even in the UK, who's putting enough in their pension, in their 401k or their DC scheme and everything, will know that even if I don't do anything else, this money I'll get from my retirement is going to be sufficient enough for the future.
Okay.
Why? Because their pension schemes are not limited by unreasonable prudential guidelines from their regulator. They invest in private equity. Close to 20%, 21% of their investments are in private equity or alternative investments, so to speak. Another 30%, 40% is in equities. So that's already 60% of a portfolio in high return vehicles. Then you will now have your commercial papers, corporate bonds. But if you come here, you're told you can invest 100% in government securities, but you can only invest 5% in offshore or 10% in offshore. So our prudential guidance also limit, or should I say mask, maybe the aversion to risk that our fund managers have.
Okay.
So if I mask out my pension and I'm getting 5, 6% or 8% per annum from my pension scheme, I'll retire poor. And if I earn 2 million a month or 200,000 a month net, and I'm only told tax-free is 20%, then I have no incentive of putting money into my pension. I'll mask the 20 and now I have to go try something else. So there are all those dynamics that come into play.
Yes.
Where if I knew what my employer is deducting for my pension is enough for my retirement, part of my disposable income now is how can I boost my it becomes a lifestyle choice.
Yes.
I want to retire like this, so I think I need to save more.
Okay.
Here saving for retirement is survival. If I don't, and which is a huge problem that we have in Africa and in Kenya, is where people retire into poverty.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting, but you bring out two key things. So let me start with the traditional versus the modern mindset. So the people who are pensionable, or at least the people who had, there's a time when we were growing up, the motto was permanent and pensionable. And, you know, the key thing was just hang your coat. As long as your boss always knows you're somewhere around, you're working for your pension. It doesn't matter what you do in between. You're just trying to defend your position for the next 30, 40 years. Then you have a younger generation, the majority of which is below 35 years, that's very open-minded because of the access of technology and seeing what other people do. And when you look at the bulk of this population, they are YOLO. You only live once. So if I get something, I want to look hip, like I'm doing it for the gram. So you have a generation that's doing it for the gram, and that's the majority of the population. Then you have the minority that's permanent and pensionable. And the other thing that you're bringing in is to say that perhaps investments are a luxury, because can you actually afford it? Do you have the wherewithal to put money aside for the future? So today, as we're talking about investment trends, and you're looking at that old person, you're looking at the young person, you're looking at investment per se as a luxury, how do you How do you manage this, especially because you're coming from a background of you are an investment manager, you try and encourage people to put money aside for your future self because your future self will not be as vibrant. I know it's a broad question, but how do we think about it so that we're able to address the issue of, first and foremost, there's a rationale for investing. Then secondly, because of it being a luxury where we are at, then how do we, what assets can we actually put our money in just to enhance the value that we get?
Okay. So I think the major problem that we have, especially in Africa and in Kenya, is where, one, we think our children are our retirement. Yeah? As in, have enough children, invest everything you can in educating your children,
yes,
so that they can take care of you when you're old. And you said, we have a now generation which is a YOLO generation. If that is your strategy, then you will be shocked. By the time they're done, they're thinking, I don't owe you any favor. I don't owe you anything to actually, do anything for you. So if we cannot handle, and as much as we say Kenya is a very young population, it's an advantage for us. But what it does create a huge dependency problem. Yeah. So I am a 25-year-old, 35-year-old working. I have siblings that I need to pay for. I have old parents I need to pay for. I have my own children that I need to pay for. Literally, I have nothing to save because of the dependency mentality. So then now I get into that vicious cycle of I have to wait until my children grow up so that they can take care of me. But if we take the approach of saying, let's take one generation at a time. So if you and I, our generation, say we are going to save for our retirement and we are not going to depend on our children. So saving in retirement is not just necessarily a pension scheme. Pension scheme is one of the options.
Okay.
You can invest in, some people invest in property to earn rental income when you've retired. You can invest in financial securities, just buy equities. You can get good dividends when you're in retirement, or invest in money market,
okay,
get the power of compounding. So we also need to demystify that when we say save for retirement, we're not just talking about pension. Pension is just one of the options.
Yes.
And it should only be one of the options. It should not be your only plan. Ideally, I normally say pension should be plan B.
All right.
That if everything else you're trying to do does not work, at least you have a pension to fall back on. Because at the end of the day, a pension can be wiped out by inflation. A pension can be wiped out by poor economic policies just before you access it. Case in point, Zimbabwe, where inflation reached millions of percentage points. So all of a sudden, you are 1 year to 2 years to retirement, you're thinking, I have a nice pension pot, inflation soars by 1 million %, you are literally left with paper, useless paper, nothing. So it should be one of the plans. So if individuals start liberating themselves and saying, I'm saving for my retirement, however way I'm going to do it, you see what you do is you liberate your children. So my children should not worry about taking care of me. They should not be worried about saving for themselves.
Okay.
And you realize one generation at a time, you start moving out of poverty. So if you look at case in point, Japan, reason why Japan has grown and has survived even during all these years of stagnated growth is their huge level of savings, especially for the older generation. They have a huge chunks of savings. Same as the US. The generation after World War II were savers. They are now the billionaires now and the millionaires now. And what has that done? They're now bequeathing their wealth to their children. So their children don't have to really worry much about having to try and build a humongous pot, because at least daddy has a B or mommy has a B.
Yes.
At least I'll get something to pick me up from there.
Okay.
But what do we bequeath our children here in Africa? Medical bills when you've died, burying you bills, and even the ones who are rich. Case in point, the Koinange family.
Yes.
It's been 20, 30 years. They are still fighting over the inheritance.
Okay.
And it's not helping them. So I think that if individuals change their mindset and say, it will stop with me, I will not depend on my children.
Yes.
for retirement, you realize then the issue of dependency starts going away, and slowly we move away from the aspect of retiring into poverty.
Okay.
And once you have money, once you start saving, no matter how little you save, you realize now you can start taking advantage of investment opportunities.
Okay.
But then if an opportunity comes, and I have no money.
You just sort of
you
know
have to
about
look at
it, but
and
you can't do
yeah,
anything.
even if you tell me Safaricom is at a good buy right now, I'm thinking, but sina pesa, I don't have money, I can't buy.
Fair enough,
Exactly,
fair enough.
yeah.
All right, Regina, we'll just take a short break. When we come back now, we delve into some of the returns. That was us just trying to create a schematic and say, where are we at as a continent, as a people of this country of Kenya? Is investment a luxury? It could be, it might not be, but whatever position you're standing in, there is an element of putting money aside, especially for your future self. We've had a broad base of conversation comparing ourselves with the West. We take a break. When we come back, now it's to understand what assets are available for you, what returns are we seeing, and if investment is not a luxury for you, then perhaps where can you put your money so that it can be able to grow? Our SMS line is running on your screens. That's 20146. We would like to hear your voice. Where are you watching us from? What are some of your questions? Are you thinking about investments? Are they a luxury? Please talk to us. We're also available on social media platforms. That's at Mbitha Mwema on Twitter or Facebook. Also at Metropole TV on the similar platforms. Let's discuss. Is investment a luxury? Yes or no? See you after the break.